So today I have Allison Kave in the studio.
Hi!
This is exactly where you need to come for credible life advice. You ask the questions, and we're going to answer them. Allison Kave, for those of you who don't know who you are, is the co-owner of Butter Scotch, which is a female-owned and operated cocktail bar and a bakery at the same time in Brooklyn, New York. They've been hailed as basically a 50s style soda shop dipped in whiskey by Thrillist, wrote that. Emma Allen from the New York Times, or the New Yorker, wrote that they are a drunken pixie dream lady serving up s'mores pie and jello shots. I'm in for that. And Clinton Kelly from the Chew just said, holy shit. So how could I not have you on the show when you're described as this? But I'm going to continue. I'm totally in love with your branding.
Thank you.
P.S. Your Instagram is at Drunk Bakers. Drunk Bakers.
Yes.
If you knew how bad I was at baking, you'd start drinking too.
I mean,
in my kitchen.
A little booze helps.
Little booze,
move it along.
Of course,
yeah.
of course. And you have amazing hashtags like "Bitch Loves Sprinkles" and "Lady Bar."
Yes.
I love those. In part, though, and there's a serious, not so serious, but important message here, is that you wanted to create a safe space for women to be able to go out and have a cocktail, which we're going to talk about. So you created a place for women, but it's for everyone. It's not just for women. That's important to note. I wanted to have her on the show because she is a woman-owned business, and you employ a lot of women.
We do.
Exclusively women?
No.
You can't. I mean, I guess that's against the law.
Yeah, and we also, I mean, we don't, in any way sort of like structure that. It's just, it happens to be that a lot of women apply to work with us.
Right.
I think because we are so sort of like outwardly feminist. Yeah.
Yes, and cool.
Thanks.
Which go hand in hand. Also, so this was a huge note, is that every dollar you spend on a cocktail,
$1 from
$1.
every cocktail.
Sorry,
Yeah.
$1 from every cocktail. Yeah, every bit of profit goes to Planned Parenthood. If we could,
yeah,
goes to Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
Which is huge. So there's a social impact behind what you're doing.
Yeah, we try.
So here, let's just get started. So,
Okay.
How did you get started?
So I originally had a pie company, and my business partner, Kevy Landreth, had a cupcake company, and we were both doing a lot of sort of outdoor markets like the Brooklyn Flea and Smorgasburg and some catering and some wholesale. And we were really like growing our businesses really small.
Did you study this?
No, not at all.
So this was like a hobby you were doing, and then you started doing all the markets.
Yeah, it was like a hobby.
Which is how a lot of artists start in New York.
Totally, especially, and a lot of like food people come from other careers. I originally had been like a gallery director. I worked in contemporary art for a long time, and so it was really just a hobby. And then when the market crashed in 2007, 2008, I wound up finding myself unemployed for a little while because it really hit the contemporary market in a big way.
Yeah.
And that's when the pie business like sort of took off.
For you.
And then Butter and Scotch came about. Kevy and I both sort of hit that same growth wall at the same time, where we really wanted a brick and mortar location, and we wanted just a physical space, and we didn't want to just have like a traditional bakery.
And are you living in Brooklyn at the time?
Yes, and I'm still in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah. I had been also moonlighting as a bartender the whole time I had my pie business to like basically pay my rent.
Yes, of course.
Sadly, selling pie is not enough to pay your rent usually. And so, we got together and we started brainstorming, had like 2 pitchers of sangria, and came up with this idea to have a cocktail bar and bakery.
Did you come up with a name right away during that cocktail?
No, Kevy is the one who came up with the name, and it took maybe like, it took a few weeks or a month, and she was actually visiting visiting her family in Washington, and I get a phone call, and she's like, so, I was just thinking about this. It could just be like a placeholder. What do you think of butter and scotch? And I was like, well, that's it.
It's so awesome.
Yeah, because we really wanted something where you could give like equal weight to the bakery and the bar side, and like convey in sort of a one quick phrase what it was, and I feel like this really captures it.
Oh, it's awesome. Like you can't help but pause when you read the words butter and scotch.
Right, because it's like,
Butter
scotch,
but it's not,
also like
so
bakery
so
and
the
bar.
big question then becomes, and we were just talking before we went on air, that so few women get VC funding in this country. So how do you raise the money to do this? This is like the big question. I think there was a Kickstarter campaign.
There was everything.
I don't know if you guys can hear this. There was just this like huge sigh of like,
it was like,
this makes me angry and want to cry at the same time. Same. I have to say, because I just know how many meetings I've taken for years trying to get funding.
It's really hard, and neither of us comes from like, neither of us came at this with like a trust fund, right?
What do you mean?
Yeah, I know, imagine. And so, that is the story. A lot of like startup restaurants in New York, it's like people who maybe, worked in finance for a long time, and they're like, I want to have a restaurant, but for us.
Or I can call these 5 friends who I went to college
like
with, and they already have a restaurant group, and I can tap in.
Totally.
Yeah.
We did not have that, and we didn't have those connections. And so we basically raised the money literally like every way that you can. At first, we reached out to friends and family and, did like an equity raise for as much as we could that way, which was, a huge leap forward, but it wasn't enough to get us.
Was it hard for you to get over yourself to
Yes.
ask for that money?
Very hard.
Have you ever seen the TED Talk Amanda Palmer ever did?
No,
she's
watch that.
She's amazing. She's a kind of performance artist, songwriter, and she wrote a book, The Art of Asking for Help. And she does a TED Talk about asking for help and how hard it is for women, especially, to ask for help. So you had to get over yourself to be. I would find it really hard to go to family.
It was really hard. The other thing, though, and this is, I think, an important shift in our thinking around this. So right now, we're working on raising again for a cocktail bar that we want to open in Seattle. And the difference in our sort of perspective and our approach from the first time to now is really just about the difference between asking and offering. So when we were doing the equity raise for Butter and Scotch, we were asking for help. We were asking our friends and family to take a leap of faith and believe in this concept that we believed in and support us.
Right. Second time around now,
we're offering an opportunity.
Yeah, you're like, if you want in,
right?
Like, this is amazing.
Yes. And
so it's that
and it is.
level,
It's the confidence, but also, I think, for us, it's the difference between the first time around and the second time around and having established ourselves. But I will say, I don't think that is as much of an issue when I see like other business people and specifically men going through the same process. I think like there's just a different attitude. It is an attitude of like, hey, do you want to in on this amazing opportunity? Versus, can you help me?
Yes. I had Valerie Young. I just recorded her last week, and she is the sort of guru on imposter syndrome. And she was at a conference that morning, and she heard a woman speak whose name I don't remember. And she said that she started a venture capital fund for women because she heard the story that 2 guys had raised $1 million to create an app, and all the app did was, during a football game, text back and forth, yo. And she wasn't kidding. Like, I was like, I have to see this app, first of all.
Yeah.
But she was like, it made her so, like, what the fuck?
Right.
That she just was like, I have to, and I'm using those words, she didn't, that she had to raise some money.
Yeah.
For women.
But this is the thing.
So it was that confidence level, right?
Yeah.
So how did you do it? Did you just say like, I have to, this is a dream, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, and the first thing we did was just ask for help in a different way, which was we reached out to some colleagues of ours who had already done this, and they were incredibly supportive. It was our friends who own Brooklyn Winery,
yes.
Which is amazing. Like, they make wine in Brooklyn. It's absolutely delicious. They now have 2 locations. And Brian, who we've known for a long time, literally sat down with us and talked to us for 2 hours about how he went through his whole fundraise and really just sort of gave us an idea of like how equity raises even work.
Yeah.
Because we
What's
just
the language
came at
around
it with like
yeah.
such
What's Series
ignorance.
A? What's
Yeah,
Series
we
B?
just
Like,
didn't
what?
get any of
Yeah.
that, you know. So that was really helpful. And then we talked to the two women who own Ovenly, which is another now sort of like, I wouldn't say chain, but like they own a number of locations in New York. Also bakers, super talented, Erin and Agatha. And they like were so transparent with us and gave us their like initial projections that we then used to model our projections off of.
Amazing.
Matthew Vera, who owns Nighthawk, also like gave us so much information. I used to bartend there. So, you know, one of the things that was so cool and that remains so inspiring about working in this space in New York, and one of the reasons, frankly, that I left the art world for the food world, is how supportive and collaborative. I mean, you know, Ovenly on paper is our competition, right? They're another bakery in New York, like making somewhat similar products. And at no point did any of us really think of it that way. It was just like, here are two women trying to start something. What can we do to help them?
It's, you know what? This comes from a place of abundance.
Yeah, it does.
Really, like there's a lot of mouths to feed. Like
Right.
we can't feed every single mouth. Like, please. And all boats float to a rising tide. I really believe that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting to see who will really follow through and help out and be generous with all of their information and who won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, you learn that.
You do. And I think it is interesting sort of going through this process here, and then also now we're starting to go through this in Seattle, and they're different towns, and it's kind of interesting to see how those differences function in one city and another, you know. I mean, we still are getting a ton of support in Seattle, a lot, but it's just a different vibe. It's just a different construct. Yeah, there's like not as many businesses, there's not as many people, you know, and so it is a little bit of a different thing. There's not quite as much, I guess, of that abundance.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so tell me, you did do a Kickstarter campaign. I want women to know
did.
this.
Yeah.
So you did some family and friends raise.
Some family and friends. Then we did the Kickstarter, and we raised over $50,000, which was
on the Kickstarter.
Huge. Yeah.
Was that your asking? I guess you have to ask for how much you want,
yes,
right?
That was our goal, and we like just exceeded it, and it was a full-time job for a month. I mean, it was absolutely just that. Talk about like getting over your discomfort and asking
I have
for
the
help.
chills. Just the idea of how much work that entails.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, we found a lot of creative ways to sort of like keep it going and keep the momentum going, because, you know, they say that like the first week and the last week are really the 2 weeks where you raise most of your money on Kickstarter, and it's those sort of like that slump in the middle where you kind of plateau. And so it was really just trying to keep the momentum going all the way through was a challenge, but we did it. And we had, you know, one of the things we did toward the end was like a party at the end to sort of celebrate it and raise some more money. And it was like my birthday party / our Kickstarter party at Nighthawk again. And so, you know, we really enlisted everyone we knew to sort of help promote it and help push it. And we met our goal, which was huge. I mean, I think at that time I remember
how many years ago was this now?
This was, oh my gosh, this had to be like 6 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. And it feels like a lifetime.
I'm sure.
Forever ago.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But when you're working that hard for that long, the years go by very quickly.
It is amazing when I think back to like opening night to now, and it'll be 4 years in January.
Okay, so you raised, so people need to understand too, because everyone thinks that these things happen sort of immediately.
No, oh my God, 2 years.
And P.S. with the Kickstarter campaign, I know people who do Kickstarter campaigns who already have a lot of funding.
Right.
They do it for branding and marketing reasons, just to get their name out some
Yeah.
more, and they hire companies to run their
Yes.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, we did it.
That
ourselves.
wasn't you guys.
We were
You guys
DIY
were really
was like the
DIY.
name, yeah. It was the name of the game for us for like the entire process, really.
Because there's like a whole algorithm to it, and you can buy lists, and I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard of people raising, and women do very well on Kickstarter, so I'm not bashing Kickstarter at all, but it's crowdsourcing is really the most effective way, I think, still for women to raise money.
Yes, and now there are all of these like new crowdsourcing site specifically for women, which is, you know, very interesting. It's something we're sort of like exploring a little bit with maybe Lady Bar, which is the Seattle project.
Right.
But the Kickstarter got us further, but it did not get us all the way. Basically what we were saying was like the Kickstarter was going to get us to the place where we could like find our space and sign a lease, but we still had more money that we had to raise.
Yeah, because you had to like probably build out a kitchen.
Yes, we had to build out. We wound up doing this like huge gut reno, which, you know, in retrospect, not the move, not the way to go. It's what we did. But it's, I think, you know, a turnkey situation would have probably been better for us. But yeah, so then we wound up also getting an SBA loan, which was a huge process in itself.
Yes.
It requires like mountains of paperwork.
And SBA, for those of you guys who don't know, is
it's the Small Business Administration. Yeah. And so it's basically a federal loan specifically for small businesses. And it's basically like a loan that's underwritten by the government.
Were you scared to take out that loan?
Yes, but we didn't really have a choice. You know, it's like we had exhausted all other options. Banks were not giving out loans. I mean, that's the whole point of an SBA loan is like if you can't get a bank loan, you go through the utter nightmare that is applying for an SBA loan.
And how much was that loan? Can you say?
That one was for just under $200,000.
Oh, okay, so that was a huge chunk to change.
Yeah.
But then are you on the hook personally for that if you can't pay it back?
Yes. So they have, I mean, yes and no, like to an
brave.
extent.
This is brave.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is, but it was also like, you know, there are so many things that looking back, we would have done differently, you know, like we definitely, I think would have not found a space that needed to be like gut renovated because that took months and cut into our
budget.
Like, working capital hugely. And we wouldn't have taken on so much debt because we're still obviously paying that off right now. And it really affects your cash flow like for years.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there's so much that we have learned from Butter and Scotch that we are now trying to apply to Lady Bar because it's like, and this is information that, you know, when other people I know who are thinking about opening businesses, like ask, you know, for advice, I'm like, okay, well, wait for the right space. Ideally, you want something that like someone else has already poured all their money into, and you just have to like come in, put in some new equipment, make it look different, and open your doors. Did
you ever have a moment in when you were renting that space, this was a bad idea? Like, did your gut ever tell you?
I mean,
or were you guys just moving at such a pace where you're like, okay, we've raised all this money, we have to get something going, we have to start driving profit?
I mean, that was the main feeling, was just like, well, we did this, we're doing it.
Yeah,
you know, like it doesn't really help to sort of wallow in the doubt. But of course, like I had moments of just like going home and breaking down. I mean, you know, I still have those moments. It's not like it ever, I don't think it ever, as long as you're like doing something where you're taking risks and growing, like you're always going to be in this position at times where you have those moments of like, what am I doing?
Have I swum out too far into the deep end?
Yeah.
But this is what I think is so remarkable about these conversations, that what women need to know is that they need to know the real story.
Yeah.
Right? And that you have a capacity. One thing that has definitely become clear to me the more and more I interview women who've started businesses or women who have become really successful is their desire to want to keep learning.
Yeah.
They're very curious people in general. So they're like, okay, like if I can't figure it out that way or hit a wall that way, I can pivot and I can maneuver and I can learn how to do it this way. And also that they have their really rough times. I know this sounds so cliche, and I think I'm crazy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then that always makes me feel better when you hear the phrase, and I'm a psychotherapist, so I should know this, right? Crazy never knows they're crazy. So I'm like, if I think I'm crazy,
right.
I'm not like officially crazy.
Right. It's like when you think
like
you have
like
it all
when my
together.
friends are like bringing me to the hospital, that I'll be like, what? Is there really a problem? Right?
Yeah.
But so I just think it's really important. Like you have those doubts that are huge all the time, but you kept persevering.
I mean, at a certain point, you kind of, for me, I'm a person who, like, when I commit to something, I think I overcommit. I mean, this is like a symptom in my relationships too, where it takes me like a really long time to sort of like call it, because I'm just like, no, but if we do this and we try this and maybe we do this, you know. And so I think that is a benefit in business, you know, to sort of like
stick
lock
it out
in and commit and like just do what it takes, you know, and just go for it, and like you've made this decision and this is the decision you've made, so what choice do you have?
So what happens? So you raise it, you build out the space,
Yes.
then you launch it 4 years later. I mean, no, 2 years later, so it's been 4 years now.
It took like 2.5 years from the time that we conceived it to the time that we opened our doors. So that's how long it took for us to raise the money and like build out the space and get our doors open. So it took forever. It took us a really long time. And I think a lot of that was the fundraise, but also the build out took ages too. I think one of the things that we did during that period that was really good for us was we didn't just wait to launch the brand until the doors were open.
You did like a pre-launch.
We basically started, instead of doing like Smorgasburg and these food markets under our original businesses, we sort of like just absorbed those businesses into Butter and Scotch, and then had a booth at Smorgasburg under Butter and Scotch. And so between having that sort of presence where we were like selling our products that way and getting people aware of the concept and like building up buzz that we were going to be opening this bar bakery,
right?
And the Kickstarter, which was really, it wasn't, the marketing wasn't in any way our sole reason for doing it.
But it helped.
But it helped enormously.
Yeah.
And it got us like so many followers on social media, and just, it really helped us kind of get the word out to the people living in Crown Heights, which is where we are, like to let them know, this is coming, which was really great.
And so what was the reception like?
Really positive. I mean, there were some people who were really mystified or confused by the concept. Not everyone like immediately heard it and got it. Most women did. Yeah.
They were like,
like most people who maybe are like, have a night out and on their way home pick up like a pint of ice cream would maybe relate to this concept, Yes. I'm not saying I've ever done that.
No,
just like every other week.
Of course.
So there were some people who were sort of like, I don't really get it. And, it was a thing where we knew it would not fully be comprehensible until we opened the doors and people saw the menu and kind of got what it was,
Right.
And I feel like one of the things that we also really learned was to listen to our customers and listen to our employees about kind of what they saw us as and what they wanted us to be. So like the menu from like opening day to now has changed really dramatically in a lot of ways. Like there's some core things that are on there that have always been on there, but it really has evolved, and it's been because of all of this sort of feedback and all of this, requests and ideas coming from people and us listening to that.
Some really good advice that has always stuck with me when I was in a publishing meeting once. They said, Nell, the sweet spot is part of what you want to say and part of what other people want to hear you say.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
So it's part of what you want to put out into the world, but also like, what are your customers asking for?
Right. And there is a middle ground there for sure.
So what advice would you give female entrepreneurs? Is there one mantra that you sort of live by?
I think that the thing that I really lost and that I'm now working to regain, and I feel like in a lot of ways I have regained, is that balance. I know you hear it all the time, and it is really hard, and I'm not like in any way perfect at it. And sometimes I go too far in one direction or the other, but I do think, the first year or so that we were open, I was in such a state of like constant, essentially that like fight or flight, like adrenaline response. I was just terrified. Like I had never managed that many people before. I wasn't good at it at all.
It's hard.
And, I was conscious of how much was on the line and, how much that we were risking by doing this. And any small mistake like seemed to me like the end of the world. And, when you first open a business, everything is a mistake. Like there's so many mistakes, And it made it hard for me to focus on anything else. And so, I was that person who I was constantly like checking my email all the time. I was constantly looking at the video camera monitors that I can see on my phone of what's happening at work. And like, and looking at the sales like for the night, just constantly. And that's not healthy for me, and it's not good for my relationships, you know? And so it took me, and it wasn't good for my business partnership. It wasn't good for my staff.
Did she fall into the same trap as well? Or did
Not
she
exactly.
have a better sense
I think
of...
she's always been much better, I think, at that balance. I mean, we both went through a lot in our personal lives during that time. So we both had like a lot of struggles and a lot of turmoil and upheaval, but I feel like
it's amazing because you hear
that.
someone doing this, and especially for those of you who don't work in the food industry, and I have a little bit, it's a 24-hour job.
Yeah.
Because food has to be delivered.
Oh yeah, stuff is coming in the morning. Like, you may not open till 5, but like things are going on all day.
It's crazy, right? It's a 24/7 job. There's no downtime, and actually, I think a lot of women get burned out by it.
Yeah, I mean it's
big time.
It's exhausting. I mean, I think that I am a very good multitasker. I think you have to be a good multitasker even to just be a bartender or work service in any way, right? Because you're like, someone's talking to you, you're doing this thing, you're
mixing a drink,
and you have to like be doing it all and be pleasant,
you
know, at the same time, which is really hard. But I do think that burnout happens when you feel like you have to take it all on yourself. Like that's where it comes. And I do think that is something that anyone can do, but I think that as women, we've been sort of taught in a societal way to take responsibility for other people's emotions, for, you know, other people's problems. And I think that can really easily extend into the workplace and that space when you're starting a business. And so for me, the biggest value that I have found has been finding great people to work with me and, you know, for us, who I can really trust, that I can walk away and they have it, you know, and we have found some of those people.
It's a hard balance too, because you want to, for those of you who listened to the episode with Erica Swesson, you want to bring your human to work and be a kind, compassionate boss, but you also have to be very boundary to make sure that the actual work gets done.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in a situation in a restaurant as opposed to an office, that can be really difficult because there's just built in intrinsically a huge social aspect to the job.
Yes, it's very hard. It's honestly, I think,
what's been the hardest thing for you to learn how to do in terms of management and leadership style?
I mean, for me, because I originally came from more of an office environment, right? So I had worked in art galleries for years. And even though those spaces have their like kind of sloppy times when you have an opening and everyone's tipsy or whatever, like for the most part, it's a very professional space. Yeah. You know, everything is done.
Yeah, you have to deal with like all the like it's almost like its own reality show.
Is
that bad to say?
No, actually there was like a production company that was talking to us about wanting to do a reality show, and we were like, no.
Yeah, of course, because there just is. They're just with alcohol involved as well.
Yeah, and I just think it's also like, you know, you tend to attract people who are generally speaking in a certain age range, who are, you know,
not quite sure what
like
they're
in
doing.
The same age range as each other. And so, I mean, one of the nice things about that is that I love it when the team likes each other and gets along. I think they do better in their jobs, and it just makes me happy as a person to see that we've created this space where all of these like-minded people are meeting each other and hopefully developing friendships that they will have for the rest of their lives. You know, I mean, there were people who I met when I was bartending at Nighthawk who are some of my absolute closest friends now,
right? So there was
that is a great thing. Like, I love having a space where that can happen. As an employer and as a manager, it's making sure that people remember that like it's not their living room and like this isn't just their party, you know.
So
like
you had to learn how to get a little tough.
Well, my thing is actually I default to tough, and so my thing has been to like choose my battles, choose my moments, and really like approach those conversations from a different direction. I've really spent a lot of time thinking about like how to have
productive, difficult conversations. Yes. Yeah. You know, it's so interesting because one of the things as I continue to evolve this show that people are really asking me for, and I guess essentially what they were asking me for in my office for over a decade was the exact language to use to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard.
And everyone's afraid of confrontation.
Everyone's afraid of confrontation. I mean, women especially.
Yeah.
But I always tell people no one's going to die on the table from having a conversation.
Right. Well, and for us, it's like we're selling cake and booze. Like we're not, curing cancer
Unless someone's going to die from you having a conversation, right? But generally, that we will never be in that position. So we can have these difficult conversations, but there is a nuanced way to learn how to negotiate with somebody, or tell someone how you feel, and so that's really huge. And that's interesting because you don't seem tough at all here. So it's interesting that would but it's amazing that you were self-aware enough to say like that's my default, that I get kind of tough on them, and I have to learn how to be a little bit easier.
I think it's I don't know,
softer maybe.
Yeah, I think for me it's like I think it reads as tough, but it's really just more distracted. I think because I'm so
you have to be efficient.
I'm thinking about a million things exactly, and so it's for me it's like walking in the door, and I honestly have had moments, and this makes me so sad, but I've had moments where I'm like, don't forget to ask how their weekend was. Don't forget to ask about their daughter or whatever, because I'm just like, okay, well I have to do all these things, and it's so easy for me to just get into work mode.
Yeah. I do have to say one thing about that. With my team, one thing I say during the very first time I ever interview someone is, I'm just giving you a warning, shot over the bow. I really care about how you're doing, and we can always schedule a meeting to talk about that. Don't ever take my not doing those sort of niceties as personal. I just have to be as efficient as I can while I'm trying to get as much work done as I can in the 8 to 10 hours that we have today.
Right.
So after that's over or before, if you need to pull me aside, I'm happy to be an ear. But my emails are short, my texts are short. But then when you talk to me outside of that, there's nothing short about me.
Right.
But that warning can really help people.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Just to say hey, buyer be warned.
Right.
I'm very direct only because we have too much to do. There's too much to manage. I can't always be easy about it.
I also think that to that same point, I do think that what might be perceived that directness and that efficiency in a woman, I think, can be perceived as tough or short or whatever. And I don't think it's perceived the same way in other workspaces,
I don't think it's perceived the same way, and I think it's tolerated.
Yeah.
I think people tolerate men speaking to women that way in the workplace, because I've definitely been in workplaces where I've seen there's a difference between being efficient and abusive.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and I mean,
I've seen situations where I'm like, wow, people are really tolerating somebody's out of control behavior.
Oh,
and the tone and the way they're walking in and their energy.
I mean, not to take it there. We don't need that reminder this morning, but just,
It took me almost a week to get back to work after that one.
I felt like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really hard. It was really hard. I had one of the biggest fights I've ever had with somebody on a street after that one went down.
Oh no, my
someone I know. So it wasn't like I was yelling at a total stranger who made a comment, but that one hit really close to the bone for a lot of women. Just to go back really quickly though, how many years did it take for you to come out and say, I need to have a little bit of better balance and make a really concerted effort to have balance? When did you finally peak above the surface and say, okay, this is not a way to live a life?
I mean, it was probably when my ex said that we should go into couples counseling. But I would say it was about a year or so into the first year of the business. It was after, I would say, our first year that I was like, okay, we made it to a year. It didn't burn down. Nobody died. I'm still standing. I'm somehow still in this relationship. Let's give yourself some time.
To do this, yeah.
To just be a person.
Yeah.
To not live and breathe and die
on the floor of Butter and Scotch. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I still really struggle with this balance thing, and I teach it for a living.
Well, and it's when it's yours, and it's for you, it's not just your business, but it is you, right? It's you're your own business, your own brand. It's so interwoven, and I think that is its own specific.
It's its own beast. Yeah, it's its own animal. And I'm a mother to 3 children, and I'm spiritual, so I'm like, what's the point of it all anyway?
Right.
So I have like this existential crisis following me around all
Right.
the time. But I do think that also when you're obviously a creative, you've been in the creative arts in some way for your entire career now. And so when you're creative, there are just times where you're pushing content out as hard as you can, and that can be a really all-consuming thing. And then, hopefully you can reel it back and say, okay, now I need some time to take care of my personal life a little bit better.
Right.
So kudos to you for figuring that out.
Thank you.
Yes. So before we end, I want to know what's coming up. It sounds like maybe another bar called Lady Bar, which is, these names are so awesome. Can you guys come and write copy for me? Can you name my next book?
I
please?
do also, I have to give a shout out to our incredible brand director. So you said you loved like our brand and all of that. So this woman, Sophie Erskine, has been with us since literally since almost day one. She started as a baker. She then was working as a server, but she has a degree in graphic design and just really gets the business and the brand. And she has since been doing all of our social media, all of our design, our menus, our website, everything. And it's very
She's
much
so
thanks
talented.
to her. She's so talented, and she just is really inside the business in a way that I think is pretty valuable and exceptional. It's not the same as hiring some outside social media consultant or marketing agency. She in
live
it.
and breathes and eats it and
it's
gets
amazing.
it. Literally, she eats it.
Yeah,
she eats
she
the business.
literally eats it. Yeah.
So this obviously is your latest cookbook,
Yes.
Butter and Scotch. Your first one, though, you had another one that came out.
I did. I had a pie book called First Prize Pies that came out in 2010.
Is that before you started Butter and Scotch?
2012. Yes, it was before. It was actually, I was finishing writing it as Kevy and I were
Amazing.
brainstorming Butter and Scotch.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, you're an ambitious woman. So Butter and Scotch is out now, and you can buy this on Amazon.
You can, absolutely. And you can buy signed copies on our website as well.
And their website, by the way, is gorgeous.
Thanks, Sophie.
And so Lady Bar.
Yeah, so Lady Bar is basically going to be...
Why Seattle? Can I ask why Seattle?
Yeah, so Kevy, my partner, is originally from Washington. Her family is out there, and she just really wanted to be closer to home. And we wanted to expand. We knew we wanted to open at least one more location of something, but we didn't really want to do it in New York because it's just really, really hard and financially almost impossible to do business here. And so we just started talking about maybe we could do something out there, and landed on this concept, which is basically sort of extracting the cocktail program that we're doing at Butter and Scotch. It won't be a bakery. We will still have birthday cake as our one dessert thing, which is our most popular dessert at Butter and Scotch now. But it's really much more cocktail focused, and it's basically a feminist cocktail bar. So, still raising money for Planned Parenthood, and really just trying to create a space that's sort of very welcoming and open for anyone who's, female identified, queer identified,
LGBTQI.
Yeah, just
friendly.
very intersectional space where people can come and hang out and feel comfortable,
Have men been receptive to this?
They have. I mean, if
I walk in, what does it feel like?
It's a very mixed crowd at Butter and Scotch, in kind of every way. I mean, we do tend to get a pretty young crowd, but in terms of economic background, cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds. It is very mixed.
varied.
And it's very queer. We do, we have a big rainbow flag in the window that says "Make America Gay Again."
But you know what, because when I was living in the West Village years ago, the only option for women was really, what was it called? The cubby hole? Was that it? That was it.
I love the cubby hole.
Right? So, yeah.
But yes, that is very much a lesbian bar.
Very much a lesbian bar. So if you are maybe identify as straight or bi or whatever it is, you're not necessarily going to want to, just go sit and have a drink at the cubby hole right after work.
Right. Yeah.
So you've created a space that feels a little bit wider.
Yes, we want to be as widely
Not that the cubby hole
inclusive.
isn't. Not that the cubby hole isn't.
No, sure, but
it's nice to see other places pop up.
Yeah, there are more. I mean,
women.
There's a really cool place, sort of neighbors of ours in Prospect Heights, called Mimi's Diner, and it's run by these two amazing people, Libby and Bill, and they like intentionally were like, we want to open a queer restaurant. And it, you know, nothing about it when you walk in necessarily says like this is a queer restaurant,
yes.
like on the surface, but it's even down to like, and I'm more and more conscious of this and really making efforts toward like not using gendered, you know, language. Like when I welcome people in, it's not necessarily like, hey ladies or hi guys. It's like, hey folks, hi all, because
you know what,
I don't want to make those assumptions.
When I was writing notes today for this, I said this question is, what's the future like for you guys? Because it's just so in the vernacular.
Yeah.
And I thought about it because I was like, what is that? Like, why am I even saying that?
And I find myself still doing it. It's like, it does take time and effort to like be, and consciousness to sort of, you know,
language will catch up.
Language.
Language is going to catch up with the way people are living.
It will, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you for having
Unscripted
me.
today. Allison, it was so beautiful. Thank you. You're a real inspiration to people.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm a hugger.
Oh.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Unscripted with Nell Daly. If you could right now, we need you to head on over and review us on iTunes. As always, we will personally reach out and thank each and every one of you who do so, but we'd love your reviews, so tell us what you think. And you can always send us emails with either guests you want on the show or comments or questions. We're happy to get those, and you can find those on the website. Our contact information at nelldaly.com. To see all of my comings and goings, get updates on who our next guests are going to be, and if you just need a little bit of extra life advice or inspiration, come join me over on Instagram at Nell Daly. I use Instagram every single day. Or like us over on Facebook, and you'll automatically be following us, and that's at Nell Given Daily. That's also where you can watch us live. Before I end, I want to thank our audio editor, Walter Eggers, our video editor and co-producer, Paige McGovern, and our video production manager, Rick Endiver, co-producer, Corey Pakowski, and the rest of the Point Zero Media team. I couldn't do any of this without you. I couldn't. Of course, Teachable HQ, you guys rock. They're an amazing educational technology company. Check them out. I use them. Everybody big in the business uses them. They're just awesome. And a huge shout out of gratitude. Huge, the biggest, to all the fans who are following the show. Just like I said last week, I am so humbled by how this is all going. Thank you. Until Monday, everybody, peace out. Have a fun and safe weekend. I love you guys already.